Well, I think we will make a start. So welcome everybody to our North Eastern Yorkshire AHP Educator Career Framework webinar. I'm your host for this afternoon. My name's Ursula McFarlane. I work in the South Yorkshire AHP faculty and I'm here with colleagues from our Humber and North Yorkshire faculty, Emily Rawcliffe. We've got Fiona White from North East and North Cumbria, and we've got Sarah Hickey from West Yorkshire faculty. We've been working collaboratively to bring you this webinar today, which is hopefully something that you're going to find really useful. So, as usual, a little bit of housekeeping. I'm glad I put this on. Somebody has started recording. Is that you, Emily?
No, it wasn't me.
Are we recording? Let me just check.
Does look like it.
Somebody.
It looks like it's been recording for a while. I don't know.
That's fine. As long as we are recording, that is fine. We will be sharing the recording because, like I said, we have had lots of people, particularly in our South Yorkshire region, who haven't been able to attend due to a conflicting meeting with universities. So we will be sharing that recording afterwards for people to catch up. Please, if you're not speaking, could we ask that you mute your microphone just so that we get a really good quality recording. You may have noticed that we have disabled the chat function and instead we have enabled the question and answer function. So what we're going to do in terms of the format is that we're going to allow all of our speakers to go through their presentations and save our questions until the end. So please, if you have any questions as you are hearing the speakers, please pop them in the Q&A function, and we've got Sarah and Fiona who will be monitoring that as we go. There will be the opportunity as well if you would.
Oh, you've just muted there, Ursula, for a second.
I think somebody might have muted
yeah, that's
me.
Fine. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, so please pop your questions into that function or put your hand up at the end when we come to that section. And then we are going to be asking you to interact with some polls that we've got. We're going to do one before we go to our speakers, and then we're going to do one at the end as well. So what we thought we'd do is just run through what we decided. So the learning outcomes for this afternoon's webinar, what we wanted to do was, first of all, give you some background to the how the framework came about and how that was developed. Then we wanted to think about how the framework can be applied to help you evidence your education pillar of practice. And there are some really, really fantastic resources that exist. So we wanted really to, one, let you know where to find those resources and just go through and explain how to navigate those resources for whichever career level you are. Then we want to ensure that you can identify your educational capabilities for your current career stage for each of the 6 domains within the framework. So you will be taking you through that this afternoon. And then finally, we wanted to help you understand how you can evidence these capabilities and highlight areas for development. So that is the plan. In terms of how we're going to do that, this is the agenda for today. So I'll soon be handing over to Deborah Robinson, who is going to give you that background to the framework and will introduce herself. And then Emily Rawcliffe from Humber and North Yorkshire faculty is going to show you the resources and help you understand how you might want to navigate those. Then we're going to take you through some short presentations for how the framework can be used at each of the different career levels. So we're first going to be going to some students, Liv, Sarah and Grace, who are currently on leadership placement within the West Yorkshire faculty. Then we are going to move to Salma and Joe, who are assistant practitioners who are working as AHP support workforce leads within the West Yorkshire faculty too, and they're going to talk about Domain 3, community and co-production. Then we're going to move to Nikki and Megan, who are graduate orthotists working for Take Care Medical, and they're going to talk about their Domain 1 as early career graduates. Then we are moving back to Emily, who's going to talk about mid-career graduates and those people who are 3 to 5 years post-graduation, and she's going to be talking about Domain 4, which is formal knowledge and skills. Then we have Emily Gilberg and Alice Gare from North East and North Cumbria. They're going to be talking about Domain 6, research, innovation and quality improvement. And then we have got Andy Brammer, who is the Chief AHP from the Rotherham Foundation Trust, with his colleague Rob Milner, who's a consultant radiographer, also from the Rotherham Foundation Trust. And they are going to be talking about Domain 2, diverse and inclusive leadership. Then at 2:20, we'll move to the questions and answers and have some discussion, hopefully. And then I'll be talking to you about a summary of what you can do next in terms of using those resources. And hopefully we will aim to have you out of this room by 3 o'clock. So Emily is hopefully going to launch the first poll, which you should be seeing coming up on your screens now. So what we're wanting to know is, have you heard of this AHP Educator Career Framework prior to this webinar? And we're asking this because we know we've done quite a lot of work within our systems, and I think what we've been hearing is that people hadn't heard of it. So we just thought, because there were so many of you, we've now got 103 people on this call, if you were able to answer those questions. So, and if you can click through to the second one. So if you have answered yes, have you used it? And then click both of those and submit, and then you should see some results. So we've got 54% yes, but 46% it's changing as people are adding to that. We've got 77 people responded. So it will remain live if you want to go back to it. But we've had 81 responses and we're at 52% yes. You'd heard of it. In terms of using it, 95% of you have not used it. So hopefully this webinar is really going to help you think about how you might use it. Thank you very much for engaging in that. So our first speaker this afternoon is Deborah Robinson, who is the AHP Director at NHS Humber Health Partnership. I have your slides ready, Deborah, so if you're there, are you ready to come on and speak?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm ready to go. Thank you.
Brilliant. Over to you.
Lovely. So good afternoon, everybody. For those of you on the call, which will be most of you won't know who I am, I'm Deb Robinson. I'm an ODP by background. I worked my first 18 years as a trainee at Pinderfields and then moved to York Trust. And then I did 21 years at the University of Hull in varying different roles. And this time last year, I was just stepping down as the Interim Dean of Health Sciences at the University of Hull. I'm now back in the NHS as an AHP director, directly responsible to the Group Chief Nurse for Humber and Health Partnership. So as my role at the university, I was a member of the Council of Deans, and that's how I first got involved with this piece of work. So next slide, please, Ursula. Thank you. Okay, so the career framework, there's a number of you that have heard about it, which is really positive. So as we know, allied health professions education is increasingly important, and it's linked with sustaining the future of the AHP workforce. In the UK, the majority of AHPs moving into their first academic role in further or higher education do so after several years of practice. So you can see I had 16 years of practice before I moved over to the education sector. The framework is important. It's timely and it's needed to promote the importance of education as an integral part of every AHP's professional responsibility. So that's not just those of us that have worked in higher education or those that still work in higher education. It provides a comprehensive review of the existing career and education frameworks for the 14 allied health professions, and the purpose is to identify existing AHP educator elements, and the final report demonstrates the capabilities, career pathways, and an accredited education and training programs able to help AHPs to become better educators. And finally, to develop a draft framework which would include a generic set of educator capabilities and education qualifications applicable, should I say, to all AHPs across the AHP stages. So next slide, please. So from that introduction, the Council of Deans for Health were commissioned to do this piece of work from Health Education England, as it was now NHS England, and they had a collaboration between the Health Education England. That collaboration, meant a group that was set up. So I was one of the people that was brought in from Hull, and we were led by a lady called Alison Chambers, who then moved on from her position at Manchester Met University, and I became the SRO for the project at the Council of Deans. It was in development for a year for phases 1 and 2, and then completing planning for phase 3, which is now underway. And we aligned our work with the emerging multi-professional work to maintain alignment and contribution through co-production and an overarching framework. And it's interesting that this piece of work, we did do quite a lot of we broke it out into 2 groups. So we had one group looking at the evidence and the other group looking at the different frameworks that we could align this piece of work to. There was a separate piece of work that was running alongside this where nursing colleagues were doing a similar piece of work, but we're not quite sure where, or I'm not quite sure where that piece of work has got to. So next slide, please. So phase 1 was to develop and draft the AHP Education Workforce Capability Career Framework, and phase 2 was that stakeholder engagement. And like I say, stage 3, we are now at that implementation. And that's what this is all about today, isn't it? It's all about how do we take this framework and how do we implement this into our everyday practice moving forwards. So next slide, please. So the framework is underpinned by 6 guiding principles. People first. So that's about career progression. It's about guiding those AHPs across our professions and at every stage. So that's from support worker, apprentices, right through to consultant AHPs, or those that have moved into education through to professors. It's all about equality, diversity, inclusivity and belonging. And that's what we should all be about as AHPs anyway. And education for all, like I say, it's almost cradle to grave in the way that it's been set up. It's community centred, so that co-production piece was fundamental to the work that we did. And it's about inclusive learning. So we're not excluding anybody from this. We're not excluding anybody from being an educator either. So you'll see that in the document if you read the document. And we're talking about being multi-professional and working together as teams. Next slide, please. So you're going to go into this in more detail with the other speakers, but clearly we've got the different domains. So we've got responsibility and accountability, diverse and inclusive leadership, community and co-production, and formal knowledge and skills, digital and sustainability, and research and quality improvement. And again, when you look at the document breaks each of these domains down and gives you some subheadings at the top that gives you clues as to how could you implement this across your workforce wherever you are. Next slide, please. So who is the framework for? I can't reiterate this enough. This framework is not just about those working in education. This is everybody. This is all AHPs, as well as you as individual AHPs taking that accountability for your role that you play in education. And it's about organisations. So all of our organisations are committed to education, although sometimes we may feel that that's maybe not as strong as it could be in some areas where we've got pressures. Education always seems to be the thing that seems to fall by the wayside a little bit. But again, that goes back to you as individuals and me as an individual to make sure that we are embedding this right throughout. It's built on the premise that, again, as I'm saying, education is everyone's business. Possibilities to develop into specialised education roles for those that want to go down that route. Some people love it, some people would prefer management or other specialist roles. It's designed to be simple and it's used for profiling and promoting AHP education and the application to career stages. So again, like I've said, it's all learners, support workforce, graduate workforce and academic workforce. Next slide, please. So that's a whistle-stop tour. I'm bang on time and everything. And put your questions into the Q&A and we'll pick those up at the end of today's session. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And it's brilliant to hear how it sort of came about from somebody who was so involved in that. And hopefully it's nice for you to see this webinar happening and actually it being implemented and help people gaining an understanding of how to do that in their
yeah careers. It is. I was really excited to come along and tell you a little bit about the background of it and everything else. So yeah, really pleased.
Great.
Thank you.
I have had an email pop up to say that somebody can't see the slides. I think other people can see the slides. So what I would suggest if you can't see them, maybe leave the webinar and rejoin. Sometimes that can help. But I haven't had any other comment from anybody. If anybody else can't see the slides, just try that and see if that helps. Okay, so our next speaker is Emily Rawcliffe, who is Senior Physiotherapist at York and Scarborough Teaching Hospitals, and she's also working at the moment on preceptorship and practice education in the Humber and North Yorkshire AHP faculty. So Emily, over to you, and you're going to talk to us about the e-resource and how to use that.
Fab, thank you, Ursula. So as I said, I'm Emily, a physiotherapist, and I'm currently in a seconded role with the Humber and North Yorkshire AHP faculty. And one of those roles is around practice education, which is what has brought me to become really familiar with this AHP Educator career framework. And just jumping on the back of what Deborah just said, you know, the document is there, it's available, and it's a really good document. But I am aware as well that I also work as a frontline clinical physiotherapist, how busy everybody is and how hard it is sometimes to take the time to go through a big document. So very helpfully, South East of England NHS trusts, some people came together to collaborate to create an e-resource. And I've personally found that that's been a really user-friendly, good way of navigating the AHP Educator Career Framework and really understanding how to apply it to your career stage. So this is just a brief kind of overview of just how to access it to make it as simple as possible, because we know how busy everybody is. So next slide, please, Ursula. So basically it's on the NHS Learning Hub. Now, if you don't have an NHS Learning Hub account, it's easily made either with an NHS email address, or we're aware not everybody does have an NHS email address. So with an Open Athens account, you can actually access this e-resource, and it's free to sign up. So once you've got an account, you would just search for the AHP Educator Career Framework e-resource, and it brings up this page. Next slide, please. And then a new window would pop up, and it looks just like this. So this is when you've launched the resource. Next slide, please. And then you get a introductory page. So it's a brief overview of what the framework is, explaining to you how to navigate through the resource. But like I said before, it's really user-friendly and very self-explanatory. But for those that aren't as keen with technology, it does explain it all on that first page, how to navigate through. Thank you. So what then happens is you get a page that shows all of the career stages that are outlined within the framework. And for this example, we're going to look at students and learners. So all you would do is you would click on the career stage that is appropriate to you. So if you clicked on that career stage, next slide, please, it brings up the domains from the career framework. So you've got all 6 domains there, and then you do have some other information down the side. So like I said, it's really user friendly. You can think, it might be that you're thinking specifically you want to really hone in on one domain. So for this example, we're going to use domain 1, which is responsibility and accountability. So you'd click on that, and then it would bring you onto the next page. So what this does is you can see it outlines a bit more detail. So responsibility and accountability to ensure safe and effective education. So as Deborah was saying, it then has capabilities that are required depending on your career stage. So you're still within your career stage at this moment in time. You then click on capabilities expected at the bottom on the left, and that brings up a new page. Thank you. And it does confirm there that you are in the right career stage at the top, so you know you're still on the right information. So it's just bullet points for you there that for this specific domain, for your career stage, these are the capabilities that would be expected for you to be able to meet. And it's a really nice opportunity for you to see, am I actually meeting these capabilities, or is there something that I need to work on? And it outlines it in a really clear way for you. So the next thing you'd probably want to do is you'd then want to reflect on that and think, actually, how am I going to do that? So you go back to the main page and click on reflection on domain 1, and that brings you onto the next page. So next slide, please. Thank you. And where I think this is really useful is it has outlined how to sort of reflect on that. I know we do a lot of reflective practice as AHPs, but it's really clear. So it talks about considering what helps you achieve the capabilities you're achieving, such as strategies, experiences, training or resources, and then identify which ones you're working towards. So what are you still developing with? Consider how you could meet those capabilities, so your learning opportunities and who you need to help you to achieve that. And then also future planning. So if you're meeting your capabilities, you might wish to consider how to maintain them, or actually how to move on to the next career stage. So this example, we've talked about students and learners. You might be in your final year, you might be around the time of your final assessments or placement, and thinking, what's going to be expected of me as an early career graduate? You could go on to that career stage within this document, go back into the same domain and see what the differences are. And actually then that gives you an opportunity to think about what you might be working towards when you do graduate and start as a registered clinician, for example. Then what's really nice is you do have this downloadable reflective document. So you can, all the questions that we've just explained that are on that page, you can actually put that onto a document that you can then save into your own CPD file, and you can take that with you wherever it is you go to work. So it's a really, like I said, user-friendly, useful resource. Next slide, please. So just to summarise then, so what would you then do? So obviously we've just talked about one career stage and one domain, but you repeat that for all 6 domains. The nice thing is you can go in and out of this whenever you want, so you don't have to do it all in one go, and you can access it depending on your priority at the time. You can look at different career stages as well, like I said. You can reflect on what you're achieving and what you where your learning needs are and what you need to achieve in future. And then it can form part of your CPD file. So you've got that for your supervision, for your appraisals, for job interviews or any applications that you're doing. And you might be sat there thinking, why would I do this? I've not been doing this so far. Why would I use it now? But it develops and supports your education pillar of practice and can facilitate your career growth and personal development. But as Deborah was saying, it also can help you to support others by understanding their career stage and capabilities. So if you're supervising somebody, this document can be really useful in helping to support them as well. And ultimately, we know that if we develop our own education pillar of practice, we're going to improve our care and be doing evidence-based care, and therefore our patients, our service users are going to get a better experience from us. So we're helping ourselves, but we're also helping others as well. Thank you very much. And this final slide, when this all gets sent out, is just a link there that takes you straight to that page that I showed you at the beginning, just to bypass any searching that you've got to do online. It just takes you straight there. Thank you, Ursula.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emily. And like Emily said, just to clarify, we will be sending the slides out. And I think we have really tried to think about making this a really live, easy document to use. And because the South West did compile the e-resource, we wanted to share that with you because it is a really easy way to navigate through this framework. And I think the other thing that I should have pointed out is that apart probably from Deborah, we're all learning about this framework as well. So we're not experts, we're learning with you. And we wanted to really bring it to life and show you how the framework can be used at the different career levels. So to introduce our next speakers, hopefully we have got Liv, Sarah and Grace, who are all occupational therapy students in their 3rd year at Bradford University. And they are going to talk about Domain 5, which is digital and sustainability, to ensure that education provision is forward-facing with a focus on innovation and the environment. So I will stop sharing. And are you there?
Hi, yeah, we're here, yeah.
Oh, great. I will hand over to you guys then.
Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the first questions was, when did we first become aware of the framework? We actually became aware of it on this current placement with the West Yorkshire AHP faculty. Our educator Sarah introduced it to us when she approached us to do this webinar actually. And she directed us to the NHS Learning Hub, where we were able to look at the e-learning resource. Ways in which we've used it to support our education pillar of practice, I think, again, because we weren't aware, we've unknowingly used it. So we looked at the learning objectives, and one was to critically assess and address our learning needs, negotiate personal development plans that reflects ongoing professional development. So something as simple as our handbooks that we complete weekly, that we have supervision. We document our progress in that, and we meet learning objectives and competencies by completing that handbook. Also reflections, that also links to another learning objective. So it was to engage in self-directed learning, critically reflecting to maximise skills and knowledge, as well as the potential to lead. So again, we feel like this placement's a great example of doing that, because it's a leadership placement where we've had the task of creating a project for developmental purposes. Also, this webinar itself, it's a great experience for us that we can reflect on and utilise in future interviews, for example. Another learning objective that we referred to was to identify it was the developmental needs of individuals, but also the wider team, and how to support them to address this. So examples we thought of were like, following placement, we complete peer evaluation to support the settings where we've had a placement. It could be in an MDT meetings. We've had previous placements where we've had to develop something on the placement to utilise then on the website, which can provide information and support to service users and other members of staff. And then again, one of the other recommendations within this pillar was to actually seek opportunities to work with universities to either design or refine teaching materials. And that's really great in reflecting what we're doing currently, because our project is focusing on barriers in communication, and we've actually communicated with universities across West Yorkshire to identify occupational needs of third year AHP students and the awareness of the faculty and what they provide, which in turn we will then provide recommendations to incorporate it into teaching resources. So we're very new to it, but I think we've unknowingly been referring to it.
Yeah, so following on from what Liv said, how can we link to Domain 5 as students? So we've got Canvas, which is how we hand our stuff in online. So all our lectures, deadlines, assignment brief, reading material is all in one space, and this allows us to access relevant content for each of our modules whenever we need it. It also allows us to hand in our assignments and reference lists online with ease. So another example is SharePoint's Google and an online library. So as much as Google doesn't always give you the relevant information, having various resources and spaces to look for information, whether it's simple things such as what a word means or more complex things as how to apply for job applications, it's very useful. Also on our portal we have an online library, which means we don't really have to go in on campus if we didn't want to, as all our books, articles, journals is all at the tip of our fingers pretty much. Another example is virtual placements and work experience. So during our World Emerging Placement, we've been working remotely, and this has led to a variety of opportunities, such as the chance to engage with this webinar, building on our leadership and team working skills and learning how to communicate in different ways. We also became aware of a virtual work experience programme which was set up by the faculty, which we thought would have been very beneficial when applying for university. VR is very useful. So when out on our placement, one of our educators used a VR headset, and then through this headset, nature and specific landmarks and places in Yorkshire were shown to people on dementia and mental health wards without them having to leave their seats. Shipley College is also utilising VR at the minute. 4D rooms are replicating any environment with full wall and floor projections, surround sound, audio, and even appropriate smells. So this is helping, say, health and social care students. They're learning how to move patients from a bed to a commode, and midwifery students learning how to manage complex situations without the risk they might encounter in real life. National and global meetings like this, whilst on different placements, we've experienced remote meetings with individuals from across the UK and other countries, which can relate to anything from finances to global MDT discussions, referring to complex cases. So these opportunities allow us to share vital and diverse ideas between us. And finally, System 1, which I'm sure we're all aware of, it's also been fundamental to use on placement, as it is a hub of important information and relevant information surrounding a service user when working and collaborating with them. It's also improved our professional documentation. So over to Sarah.
Thanks, Grace. Yeah, so another question we were looking at was, how do you think the framework might support you with your current and future career goals? So we think that it will support our CPD throughout our professional career, because there are things like online learning resources such as e-learning for health, NHS Elect webinars and courses that enable us to improve our skills, knowledge and performance within our practice. An example I've got is on placement 4. I did some e-learning on memory and how to conduct a memory assessment with a patient. It was also good because I could do this from home as well. So that was beneficial when I was actually working from home. And also on the placement that we're on now, so placement 5, I've also completed courses and joined webinars on NHS Elect. And the webinars are also recorded so you can catch up at a later date. So I think that's quite beneficial. And then we also discussed for reflections and goal setting. So we use platforms such as Microsoft Office, PebblePad, and this allows us to capture our thoughts and experiences and allows us to look back on these to develop a deeper understanding on our learning and improve our practice. We use Microsoft Word to write up our reflections, and we use PowerPoint to create PowerPoints to showcase our progress within placement and uni. We also use PebblePad to create portfolios, and this enables us to reflect on placement experiences and modules completed in uni. And we also thought that when utilising remote care, such as System 1 for patient records and transfer of care, so you can view updates on patient records instantly, regardless of your location on System 1. And it also benefits the professional and the patient when working within the community, as you're able to view the workflow to check patients' information and communicate with other professionals through System 1. And we also thought Microsoft Teams as well would help support our future career goals, because you're able to join MDT work and group meetings from other locations. For example, at the moment we're doing group work on evidence-based practice, and I wasn't able to join at uni, so I joined over Teams, which meant that I could still contribute to the group and I didn't miss any work. But we also feel like it's greener for the environment, so working from home can be more environmentally friendly due to the reduction in commuting emissions. So yeah, that's everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And yet not maybe what you expected to be presenting to 110 people when you started your placement, but well done. Definitely a huge achievement. Right, I am just reloading. As I said earlier, if we are going to have a Q&A function at the end of all of our presentations. So please, if you do have any questions, pop those into the chat and we'll come to those. So next up, hopefully we have Salima and Joe, who are assistant practitioners currently working on secondment in the West Yorkshire AHP faculty. Are you there, Salima and Joe?
Yes, we're here.
Fantastic. I will hand over to you guys, and here is your slide.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Salima Elimihele. I currently work as a dietetic assistant practitioner with Bradford Teaching Hospital and also on a secondment role with the West Yorkshire AHP faculty as a support worker lead. So, Joe, would you like to introduce yourself before we go?
Yes, my name's Jo Ogden. I'm an assistant practitioner by background in trauma and orthopaedics, and I'm also on secondment at the moment as a support worker lead with the West Yorkshire faculty alongside Salima.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And today we are going to be speaking on Domain 3, which is community and co-production. And the Domain 3 of the framework emphasizes on empowerment of all voices to be change makers and agents to ensure that actions are not discriminatory. So how we intend to do today's discussion or speaking is that it's going to be like a form of interaction between myself and Joe, where I get to ask the questions and then the questions are asked back as well. Starting with the first question to Joe, when did you become aware of the framework?
So I became aware of the framework when actually asked to review it for this webinar. Sarah at the faculty approached us about talking during the webinar, and yeah, that's when I first got to know about it. How about you, Salima?
Yeah, thank you. I learned about the AHP Educator career framework after being appointed as a support work lead with the West Yorkshire faculty and also selected to speak on one of its domain, which is Domain 3 in today's webinar. Thank you. Yeah, the next question, Joe.
Yeah, so how have you or how could you use the framework to support your education pillar of practice?
Okay. As a dietetic assistant practitioner and as a support work lead, I would say I can confidently use the framework to provide support and mentor new DAPs, which is standing for dietetic assistant practitioners that are newly employed into the team, and also provide the same support to support workers to enhance their skills and confidence in practice. The framework is also a useful tool in advocating for an inclusive career progression pathway for support workers, helping them to develop from entry level to a more advanced position. As a support worker leaders, we can achieve this through our planned visits to individual trusts or organizations where we can meet with the support workers, educate them on the resources and development opportunities available. I will just add in here that our first visit was successful yesterday. We had a visitation at Irada General Hospital where we have a total number of about 7 or 8 support workers in the meeting. And we had, it was an opportunity for us to discuss the framework and also educate them on the available resources that are out there to help them with their career progression. The framework can also be used to strengthen the collaboration between the registered and the non-registered AHP support workforce. How about you, Joe?
Yes, within my career stage at the moment as an assistant practitioner, after looking through the framework, I think I would use it to support the education and mentoring of therapy assistants around me and students alongside within my workplace and the faculty as well. Using communication and feedback with learners would help me to support their educational needs. And I feel that I'm developing within my own career, and the framework would give me the confidence in participating in developing resources that will benefit other learners around me as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And the next question is, can you link the DOMI 3 in community and co-production?
Yes, so within our role at the moment with the faculty, we're connecting with learners and service users to build a resource that will provide content for both practice-based learning and further education. So the co-creation of resources like a digital Padlet with active contribution from colleagues will provide a service improvement piece of work that's really quite needed at the moment. It's going to be one place where people can go for a source of information. How about you?
Yeah, I'll say the DOMI 3 of the framework emphasizes on community and co-production, which empowers all voices and ensure non-discriminatory educational practice. This aligns directly with what I currently do as a dietetic assistant and as a support worker by engaging with support workers, dietitian, patients, and co-design educational resources and training that are real life based and is based on feedback. And there's a current discussion with the managers on how we could implement a regular competency assessment for DAPs to identify the trainees based on their individual skills using the pillars of practice as well. And it's also can be linked in how I encourage peer learning and mentorship, ensuring that knowledge is shared across all workforce level. And this I can link to a discussion with the learning facilitator within my department, where I am suggesting the involvement of DAPs in student supervision just to promote their confidence in leadership and educator skills. Yeah.
Lovely. So our final question in the domain was, how do you think the framework might support you with your current and future career goals?
Yeah, by following this framework, I can say it will be helpful for me to develop as a leader while supporting the career progression of others in the support workforce. And this is in a way of giving appropriate feedback, analyzing feedback, and responding to feedback for continual improvement. It's also going to be useful for strengthening my leadership and mentoring skills, improving my ability to support others as well, and also be a champion for support workers. Using the pillars of practice, the pillars of practice is seen as a structured guide for me in the sense that it's going to guide me on my future career, whether to advance in my career role or moving into a more senior leadership role. How about you, Joe?
Yes, so I feel the framework will give me direction and guide my capabilities as a leader. I think it's going to give me referring to it will give me the confidence to speak to others and have the reassurance in giving feedback on learning. I'm passionate about being a support worker and inspiring other support workers and making them feel valued. So I'm interested to see how new resources that we'll implement during our journey can be at the end process, and hope that they can be a sustainable source for the future workforce.
Okay, thank you everyone. That is
Thank you,
all
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Salima and Joe. Brilliant overview of that domain, and I think it is really this is one that I hope is really helpful for people on the call to think about our support workforce, because we know that our support workers play a huge role in the education of our learners. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
So, moving on to our next speakers, we have Nikki and Meg, I think you like to be known as. Apologies, I will let you correct me if I'm wrong. Nikki and Meg are recently graduated orthotists working at Take Care Medical, based at York and Scarborough Teaching Hospitals. And they're going to be talking to us about Domain 1, which is responsibility and accountability to ensure safe and effective education. So if you are there, Nikki and Meg, I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the introduction. Hello everyone, nice to see you all. I'm Nikki, and as said, I'm an early career graduate, so I'm going to be going over that section of the framework, responsibility and accountability to ensure safe and effective communication. So I'm going to say a little bit, and then I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Meg. So I've got the first slide there, I believe. Yep. So something that might be good to highlight about early career graduates to do with the framework is when we became aware of it. So we both actually only became aware of it, embarrassingly enough, when we were asked to do this talk. So at first read we thought that it was more relevant to practice educators, but then realised on a more detailed read that it is in fact relevant to all levels, including ourselves and students. So that was good to know. Could I get the next slide, please? So next up, we're going to talk about how the framework could possibly support our education pillar of practice. So one segment of the 4 pillars of practice there, and we're going to talk about education in more detail here. So I'd quite like to tie it into the capabilities of an early career graduate and talk about how that could support my education pillar of practice. So I'd like to draw your attention to that top one there. Registered practitioner retains all overall responsibility for their development. So that first one's quite relevant to how I could use the framework to support my education pillar of practice, and something that I've possibly already adhered to as an early career graduate. So I attended my preceptorship programme, which was, we would meet up quarterly, where we had the opportunity to discuss with our peers and discuss the development. So it was quite reflective, getting to speak to your peers, to discuss what in your role as an early career graduate you've been doing well, things that maybe hadn't been going so well, and then how you could look to improve upon that once you'd acknowledged it together. So attending those sessions, I would be responsible for attending them, responsible for recording them, and monitoring my progress also. I would also meet up with my mentor on occasion, and I would be responsible for organising that, where we would fill out the preceptorship, some of the preceptorship paperwork, and again just having that support there to highlight what maybe was going well in my early career and things that could be brushed up on. So I think that's a good example of how I use the framework to support my education pillar of practice. I'd like next to take your attention to the points there on peer-observed learning. So that's another capability expected of an early career graduate. So I can give you an example again of how I use the framework to achieve this. So to become more comfortable with complex patients, I quite often utilise shadowing sessions where a more experienced clinician would shadow me, and then I could often write a reflective piece on that, where afterwards I would get to reflect on what went well and maybe things in the session that didn't go so well, and then my mentor could give me feedback on that also. This would give me some of the more a good view on how to independently work in the future. So I'm very glad that the framework highlights that, and it's good to have an awareness of it now for the future. I'll pass you over to Meg now. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, changes life. So yeah, my name's Meg. I'm also an early career graduate at Take Care. And so I just wanted to look a bit more at Domain 1. Nikki's kind of gone over some of the capabilities of it already. But Domain 1 is really very important as an early career graduate, as much about educating yourself, as Nikki's kind of already gone over, not just about educating other people. And that means you're responsible for your own education, which way you want to go with your career path, where you sort of want to start to specialise. Obviously, as an early career graduate, a lot of it is just trying to get your head around your own clinics, but there is a bit of space for working out what you think you want to do next, and you're responsible to ask for any sort of guidance and training that you'd like to go on with that. It's also about cooperation with the safe and effective communication as well, and that's safe and effective communication with everyone, so that's students, colleagues, patients, other professionals. And there's sort of some examples that I'd like to go over of where you can take responsibility to ensure that can happen. So things such as using dyslexia-friendly fonts in any resources that you produce to increase accessibility for the most amount of people. Same with using simplified English. That's useful for, again, dyslexia, communication difficulties, or even anyone just starting to learn English, which can be particularly relevant to some of our patients. We're also responsible for educating them as well. In orthotics, we're obviously supplying a lot of devices, and we need to make sure that people know how to use them. Third way is thinking about preferred pronouns and preferred names. It's a sign of respect, and it makes people feel safe, and you're more likely to be able to communicate with them. Again, that's relevant for everyone, colleagues, students, patients. Also like to discuss the fact that I believe it's actually CPD week this week, handling, and you are very much responsible and accountable for your own CPD. And when it goes to audit, if HCPC come knocking on the door, it's only you that's got any consequences if you haven't been completing that at all. So just some guidance from it. HCPC want it to be regular, different types of activities, and relevant to improve your practice for yourself and your service users. So you can't sadly be picking random courses, but it is up to you what you want to do and how you want to do it, and keep an eye on that. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the last question was to think about how the framework might support current and future career goals. So I just wanted to reflect on the capabilities, and Nikki's kind of gone over some of the capabilities that he's already been doing almost by mistake, if we weren't quite aware of the framework previously. But I wanted to just reflect on what I need to do to progress my own career, and that's at the moment is to be more responsible for asking for any more additional training to extend my knowledge. I've been in the job for 18 months, so I've just started to become confident with my own clinics, so it's now time to look for the next steps of where to go. I've recently taken over clinics covering all the local SEN schools in the area, or the one in our trust. So I now need to be looking to extend my knowledge, mostly within paediatric therapies, and working with physios and OTs as well, to create the best care for the children that we can. So really the important thing about this domain is sort of increasing and educating myself, increase my knowledge and educating myself is going to allow me to better educate everyone else that I'm in contact with. And that's really important for the education pillar of practice, that is about you and others as well. I think that's all from myself and Nikki, so I'll pass back to you, Ursula.
Thank you very much, Meg and Nikki. That's really great to hear. And I think there is a theme coming through here that our speakers, many of them only found out about the framework as we asked them to speak. But I think that is absolutely fine. And if, you know, we've got a lot of people on the call that the framework is very new to, like I said, we are all learning together about this framework. And I think hopefully, as you've talked about CPD, and for those of us who are registered AHPs in that re-registration that we have to go through, then this is going to be really helpful in really evidencing that education pillar. So thank you very much for that. Next, we are moving back to Emily, and although she is not a mid-career graduate anymore, you've moved past that 3 to 5 years level, career level. You have spoken to some people, Emily, and you're going to talk to us about Domain 4, the formal knowledge and skills to deliver evidence-based informed education. So, Emily, I'll pass over to you to tell us about what you're going to tell us about this career level and domain.
Fab, thank you. So yeah, as Ashley says, I'm not in my mid-career anymore. So it's sort of a reflective piece really about my mid-career, and I want to tell you a bit more about why I wish this had been available in my mid-career as well. And then I've got a bit of a case study from a mid-career physiotherapy colleague. Thank you. So a little bit about myself then. So I am just over 10 years qualified. I have been in this region the whole time. So I graduated from York St John as a physiotherapist in 2014 and started my career working in Bradford. I then moved on to Leeds Teaching Hospitals, where I did my Band 5 rotations, and then started my Band 6 in MSK, rotating in 2017. And then I moved over to work in York. I relocated as I live in York in 2022. So the career framework was only released in 2023. And I started in my current role, which is a secondment role, in April 24. And that's when I really became aware of the framework. My role within the practice education and looking at practice education for AHPs across the region really brought it to my attention. And as I showed you earlier with the e-resource, I've become very familiar with it, and I now really feel like it can support me going forward in my career. And like I said, I wish I'd had it earlier on. So that's where I just want to talk to you a little bit about how I think it could have been helpful. Like I say, I'm talking about formal knowledge and skills. So it would have been really helpful for my own development. So when we're thinking about supervision, appraisal, and understanding career opportunities. So it would have really supported me in my supervision preparation. I think going into a supervision session prepared and knowing what it is that you need to do makes it a more worthwhile session. It would have guided my division of non-clinical time with my leadership, research and education. So I think it would have supported me in helping look at all 4 pillars of my practice. And it also would have helped me to understand how those 4 pillars work together. So if you're thinking about designing and planning and delivering educational content, your research is there to make sure you've got evidence-based material that you're putting into your content. Your organisation of the delivery comes under your leadership and your clinical and education pillars. And then delivery and implementation really looks at your clinical knowledge and skills, your education and your leadership skills as well. So actually it would have been really useful for that stage in my career. I also could have used it to support me in supporting others. So at that stage, mid-career, you really are looking at supporting potentially other Band 5s, especially if you're in a Band 6 role, therapy assistants, students, but also more recently for AHPs, a lot of our mid-career graduates are preceptors with preceptees that they support as well. And it really would help you in understanding their career stage and how to help them get the most out of their career as well. Obviously, we're talking about people taking responsibility for their own development, but if you've got someone there who really understands that career stage, they can support them to make their goals. So that's where I would have found it really useful for my supervision practice. Also for students, I think it's really great to understand that those 4 pillars of practice at a pre-registration level as well. So sometimes people first hear about it maybe at university and then fully understand it when they're working, but to really understand it on placement as well and bring those 4 pillars into their practice is really good. So why would it be useful? So I've said a lot in what I've just been talking about, but ultimately your mid-career is a stage where you've got almost as much focus on other people and their career stages as well as your own. You're thinking about, you know, you're doing clinical work, you're also supporting others, supervising others, and you're thinking about where you want your career to go. Can be a bit of a hectic career stage, which may be exemplified by the fact that we don't actually have anybody here talking about this career stage because of the pressures on their clinical work and the service pressures that are just the case, especially coming out of winter. So it's a really useful tool to have. Thank you, Ursula. Next slide, please. So just a quick case study then. So a colleague of mine who is in a new Band 6 role as a physiotherapist, I asked them the questions that everyone else has been talking about. So they hadn't previously heard of the AHP career framework, and I asked them if they would have a read through it and answer these questions. And they said, based on Domain 4, we asked, how do you think it could support you in progressing your education pillar of practice? And they said it could help them understand the specifics of what is expected for their education pillar of practice at this point in their career and help guide them to complete tasks that they feel they're not yet meeting. So they felt they were achieving the top 4 bullet points of Domain 4 in this framework, but felt they were struggling with the bottom 2 and hadn't perhaps realised that prior to looking at the framework. So the first 4 bullet points were easy to fit into day-to-day responsibilities. So it was perhaps educating your students, no matter how busy the service is. If your students are with you, you're going to be educating them. Same goes for your junior members of staff that you're working with and support workers. If you've got an in-service training planned, as long as the service developments aren't at maximum, then you are going to be able to complete that in-service training because it is planned and in the diary. What they felt the barriers were to the bottom 2 bullet points were the development of educational practice and engagement in knowledge exchange requires much more non-clinical time, and they need more service development time, and that's got to be put in, and that's time taken away from the ward. So they felt that service demand pressures are so high that is harder to do. And they did say it's one thing to identify areas of clinical development needed, but it's another to have time to complete them. And we do know that this is an issue. So we then said, well, how would you use the career framework to help you overcome these barriers? So they said the framework has highlighted to them where their gaps in their education pillar of practice are. It's going to help them to focus on their development. It's going to help evidence and demonstrate the need for personal development. So when they go to their appraisal or supervision session, they can say there's this evidence here for what I should be completing at this career stage. And actually, I feel I'm struggling to meet these current points. And it gives that weight to having the time to complete the tasks. So they might then be able to say, these are the specific projects I want to do to help complete these capabilities. And so therefore, this framework shows that I need the time to do that. And it would be easier to put that into their personal development plans. So it's a really nice example of how they found the framework now and they feel that they could really use it to help them. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. And thank you for reflecting on your mid-career. And please pass on your thanks to your colleague who participated in the case study, because it is really difficult in terms of people's time at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we are going to be saving, we have got some questions popped into the chat. We're going to save those until the end of our presentations. So next we have Alice Gare and Emily Gilberg. They are currently AHP Clinical Fellows with the AHP faculty in North East and North Cumbria ICB. So Emily and Alice, I will hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Ursula. So yeah, my name's Emily. I am an AHP Clinical Fellow within the North East and North Cumbria. I've been working in the fellowship role for approaching a year. My substantive role, or like sort of usual day job, if you like, is working with Newcastle Hospital's Education and Practice Development Lead for therapy services. And both myself and Alice are both occupational therapists by profession. I'll let Alice do a quick introduction to herself as well.
Hi guys, lovely to meet you all. My name's Alice. I also work as a clinical fellow alongside Emily at the moment. I've been leading on a work stream around workforce intelligence among AHPs with lived experience of disability, difference and long-term health conditions. On the kind of like my day job, if you like, alongside that is I'm a clinical specialist in neonatal care as an occupational therapist, and I also work into community paediatric services as well.
That's great. If we have our next slide, Ursula.
So I feel like we align with everybody here in regards to the awareness of the educator career framework. So we, Emily and I, were not that very well kind of educated on the framework when we'd been in our clinical roles, and it wasn't until we'd started working into the fellowship roles where we had a lot of engagement with the workforce and started to become much more aware of the challenges and the opportunities and the tools that were out there to kind of overcome those barriers, which are detailed in the slide. And really that's when we recognised that the educator career framework would be a really useful tool to overcome lots of these issues, including issues that are then compounded for people that are impacted by equality, diversity, inclusion and belonging issues.
Okay, next slide. Thank you. So this slide just asked us to think about and gathers our thoughts really on use of the framework to support the educational pillar of practice. So what sort of things, how could we start to utilise it more, or where does it align to some of the work that we're already doing? So what we want to really try and do moving forwards is continue to advocate use of the framework. We want to use it to identify gaps across the workforce, identify where there is gaps in that education pillar across different workforce roles and across the career pathway. We want to cross-reference the framework and integrate it more into key other activities like supervision, appraisal and job planning. And we want to use the framework to define specific activities and requirements, so help us to exemplify things a bit more practically to enable the framework to be used more autonomously and consistently. We also want to use the framework as a more sort of unified and overarching approach as well across professions. We know that some guidance and frameworks exist in some AHP professions, but it does vary, and it varies as to how aware people are of that, whereas this is something that can be utilised across the whole workforce. So if we go on to our next slide, please. This slide just starts to get us thinking, and I'm going first in terms of thinking about the research, innovation and quality improvement domain. And we've got the different descriptors across the top in the purple section. And you can see there's a lot of detail on this slide, and we're not going to go into everything in loads of detail, but we just wanted to sort of pick out some key examples. So you can see that a lot of the specifics of the domain look into kind of how you participate in educational activity and how you provide leadership. So in my fellowship, I've been looking into a key educational activity and offer, which is preceptorship, and looking at mapping that across the system and benchmarking maturity across the system as well. So that's been really important in terms of participating in that sort of educational audit, as it were, and aligns with that area of the domain. In terms of developing or leading educational audit, I lead in my current role as Education and Practice Development Lead. I support and lead on a number of projects that are focused on improving quality and addressing educational needs where there has been a gap. So they want to kind of upskill staff, or they want to upskill the workforce around a particular patient need. I very much work alongside clinical experts to design and deliver education. So often when they've identified that gap, it's about working with them to kind of critically evaluate, as that domain suggests, about kind of what we can include to make it an inclusive and accessible syllabus in a curriculum that feels relevant to the needs that they're designing it for. I also really try and look at outcomes of learning in myself and in others. So what I'm starting to do is make sure that we're aligning key outcomes of learning, like with preceptorship, to things that are aligned to relevant data sets, so that we're aligning the impact of that with things like retention and recruitment and things. And the final area in this domain was about thinking about how we adapt learning and teaching practice in response to evaluation. And a key example of that for me is designing and delivering an education module that I put together for AHP clinicians, which has been continuously evaluated to ensure that AHPs can deliver education and can upskill what they're doing in terms of design and delivery of education, and recognising those limitations in our infrastructure, but using this module as a way for clinicians to support that work and support delivery of education in their clinical roles. So we'll go on to the next slide. This is just me thinking about current and future goals. So I want to continue to use the framework to structure and support work that I do for education and practice development, and just improving that alignment really. Really trying to embed an awareness and application of this framework across the workforce, so really utilising it as a tool and doing similar mapping exercises to what I've done and demonstrating that that's going to give people some practical ideas of things that they can do. To use it to identify gaps in my own educational practice, and again helping me to think practically around activities that I could engage in to address that, and to consistently consider the education needs and opportunities across the career pathway. And I think I particularly found the session today on the support workforce really, really helpful, so that we can think about how this framework practically applies across the workforce. So next slide, and I'll pass to Alice now.
Thank you. So just to kind of echo what Emily said, I'm going to give you some examples. I'll not read through it all, but basically I've used operational and strategic examples from my two roles. And kind of retrospectively, when I reflect on what I have done and what I'm kind of working towards, that there have been opportunities that have led for me to participate in activities within this domain. It's allowed me, there's been multiple opportunities to kind of have that leadership of projects, whether that's within operational kind of clinical practice, or within other opportunities, voluntary opportunities, or within my strategic role as an AHP fellow. I've ensured that I've critically evaluated the developments and any changes as I've been developing projects or service improvements or education packages, in addition to actually critically evaluating the outcomes and thinking about the impact, not just for myself and my own development, but actually the work that we're doing, that we need to be able to see is helpful for the communities that we serve. And then finally, in response to that, it's really important that I am adapting to the feedback that we're getting. So with my NHS ICB fellowship, I very much co-designed, co-delivered and co-evaluated that project with AHPs with lived experience. And it was that voice, along with kind of national data sets and regional data sets, kind of understanding how things married up where things needed to change, that I used that feedback loop to continue evaluate and continue to develop what I was working on. Next slide, sorry. So again, like Emily advised, I've got some pointers here that are actually kind of personal goals, but they're also strategic goals as well that we need to think about as a workforce, particularly thinking about inclusivity and accessibility. It's great that people have made reference to that already today, and it's really about using this framework to allow us to appreciate the variation, the diversity, not just of the needs of our workforce, but actually the value that brings in developing what we're able to offer and how we function as a workforce. For me, it's very much around helping me to further reach my true potential and ensuring that I have a holistic skill set, so identifying any gaps in my knowledge and that we all do have, that we can continue to build upon. It allows me the confidence to define clear goals, and when I take that to whoever's supervising me, and demonstrate that need, as well as allowing me to do that for others as well, other learners and people that we support, and creating those opportunities to raise others up as they progress in their career.
Lovely. Alice and Emily, thank you so much for sharing your reflections on this framework. Really, really helpful to hear how you have started to think about it in action. Alice.
Thank you. I just need to excuse myself because I need to get back onto the ward. Is that okay?
Absolutely. And the recording will
Okay.
be there for you to catch up on the remainder. But thank you
Okay.
so much for joining us.
No worries. Happy if anyone's got any questions to go to Emily, or if they need to speak to me, just to pass on my emails. Fine. Okay.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Alice.
Thanks. Bye.
Lovely. So our final speakers today are Andy Brammer, who's the Chief AHP at the Rotherham Foundation Trust, and Rob Milner, who is a consultant radiographer also at the same trust. And they're going to talk to us about their career level and diverse and inclusive leadership to overcome barriers and provide solutions for the provision of inclusive education. So I will hand over to you, Andy and Rob.
Okay, can you hear me okay, Ursula?
Yeah,
great.
Thank you.
So hi everyone, I'm Andy Brammer, I'm Chief AHP at the Rotherham FT. As Ursula said, I'm a diagnostic radiographer by background. Can we move to the next slide? I've also roped Rob Milner, who's a consultant radiographer at our trust, into supporting me with this presentation, and thank you to him for that. If you don't mind, I'll just kind of congratulate everyone who's spoken so far, Ursula, particularly those students and support workforce and new registrants who I think have done a sterling job in presenting to this many people online this afternoon. So I'm going to give my thoughts about this as a Chief AHP, having been in the post for 11 months. So that means that I think get to call myself a new in post Chief AHP. And I can't remember exactly when I became aware of the Educator framework. What I do know is it was published about a year before I started in post. And like many others, I think I was probably guilty, if that's the right word, of taking the title at face value and thinking that it probably didn't apply to me. Unlike Deborah, my career path has been quite different insofar as I haven't been heavily involved in education myself. I've taken a very operational management route to where I am now as a Chief AHP, and that and the timing and the priorities of getting used to any new role means that I didn't really take much in the way of interest of this framework, but now know better, fortunately. In terms of diverse and inclusive leadership, the capabilities of me expected at this stage, clearly I've got some responsibilities as a Chief AHP for the strategic leadership and engagement and awareness of this framework. I attend CPD panels in our organisation, which is responsible for the approval of regionally allocated funding for nurses, midwifery and AHP education, CPD funding. That's an example of me considering my role in that regard and ensuring that our panel considers the need for diversity and inclusivity in the allocation of those funds. Our organisational EDI lead joins those panels, and I think there's an opportunity for us to consider how we run those panels to ensure that they consider the needs of our AHPs and AHP support workforce in terms of allocation of funding. I'm also involved in the ongoing shaping of the Multi-Professional Preceptorship Academy programme and get involved in delivery of some of the content on those sessions myself. And I think that's an opportunity for me to kind of think about how I'm supporting that ongoing development of that programme to ensure that it is considering the needs of our workforce. So unlike others, I haven't yet kind of been able to analyse my own strengths and weaknesses in this regard, but I do think that 11 months into the new role, now is a timely point for me to do it, actually, you know, coming up to my appraisal and thinking about my objectives for the year ahead. And I think the Educator framework, the online tool, will be particularly useful for people who are maybe in that position where they haven't done much in the way of reflection about where they are against these capabilities. And there are, I think as Emily said earlier, there are these really useful template documents that can be downloaded. So my own personal to-do list now from here at this point in my career is to look at these SWOT analysis and reflection templates for the different domains within the framework, and develop a bit of a personal action plan for me for the year ahead and ongoing as I continue to adjust to the new Chief AHP role that I find myself in, as well as ensuring that others are aware of the framework, AHPs, support workers and students, but particularly those in educator, advanced and consultant practitioner roles, where obviously the education pillar is very important. So I hope that gives you know, a very frank and an honest overview of where I am in my own thinking about this framework. Having alluded to the importance of it for advanced and consultant practitioners, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Rob. So over to you, Rob, if that's all right. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Ursula. Can I just check that you can all hear me okay? I'm speaking from home today, so if my sound drops out, please let me know, and I'll turn my camera off, which will help. Yeah, I'm a consultant radiographer. I've been in post for 8 years this month, which has absolutely flown by. I'm really passionate about education. My background is I'm a reporting radiographer, so reporting the X-rays. But I'm really passionate about education. I lecture for a couple of local universities. I lecture for a couple of private medical companies. I once, at one point for a few years, ran my own education company alongside a consultant radiologist. So it is something that I'm really passionate about, and I'll freely admit that until I was asked to take part in this, I'd not really give this framework much thought. So those of you who haven't been aware of it, and especially the 95% of us in this room that have never used it, don't feel guilty about that. There's it's in a age of framework overload and policies and guidance overload, it's so easy to not give everything 100% attention. So I did have a read of this in the last 3 or 4 weeks as I've been asked to become involved. And what I want to do is to talk a little bit about how leaders can overcome the barriers and provide some solutions for the provision of this inclusive education, which is what this domain is all about. I think we've all worked in trusts where education is quite prescriptive, and we've all been guilty of it. Leaders potentially, because it's quite easy to do and doesn't require much thought, might put on a couple of lunchtime lectures, a couple of CPD sessions. They might allocate a little bit of funding to go on a course here and there. But I think the way that we embed learning into everyday practice is by thinking a little bit wider than that, outside the box. So prescriptive learning, what do I mean by that? So mass training would be a good example of prescriptive learning. We have to do it at defined and specific intervals. We often need to achieve minimum score in a test at the end. Now that type of learning has got its place, but I think this framework wants us as leaders and AHPs to build on that and create a learning environment. What do I mean by learning environment? Now, obviously a learning environment can be a physical location such as a classroom or a CPD location, but again, in this framework's context, I interpret it to mean the culture of the workplace, it's the learning environment as the culture. So how could we do this? So I'm just going to give a few things that I've thought about in the last couple of weeks about how we can embed and try and change the environment of learning within our department. So we could start with the onboarding process or the preceptorship period of a new recruit or someone who's moved into a new role. We need to be seen to encourage and promote a culture of learning in order to set an expectation that the learning is encouraged and supported. And I think it's important to try and do this without it being deliberate or applied, because we want the learning to be embedded rather than forced. Examples might include, as a part of the preceptorship or the new starter onboarding process, a reflection activity where that staff member sees themselves now, what they think their new role might entail, what potential challenges they might come across, and how they see themselves growing into that role. There are lots and lots of different possibilities, but I think the key take-home point is that the learning links to everyday activities and provides value to that individual, rather than potentially just sporadic CPD sessions or lectures or going on a course. So in order for that learning to be prescriptive, to not be prescriptive, we need to integrate it into the normal working day. I think learning takes place in many forms and often goes unnoticed or unrecognised, which is absolutely fine. Reflection is critical here. I think it was Megan that mentioned that HCPC might come knocking and they want this education and the CPD activities to be quite regular. So we do need to embed this into the normal working day, and we need to reflect on, and ideally we would reflect on a weekly basis, but at the very least a monthly basis on what we've achieved, what we've done that week. As leaders, we need to allow time and opportunity for our employees to ask questions, to research, collaborate, and then disseminate their findings within the department. This doesn't have to be in-depth research. It could literally be as simple as coming across a particular disease or process or a condition, and just getting on Google, doing a little bit of research, reading a couple of articles. But I think the important thing is to reflect on that and to be able to disseminate it across the team. Next slide, please. So I think lifelong learning is fundamental to AHPs, and this has been touched upon earlier in this webinar. So as AHPs, we know full well that technology and clinical evidence is continually being updated and refreshed, and the way that we diagnose and treat patients changes over time. Now, I qualified as a radiographer in 2006, and in less than 20 years, some of the methods and research and ways we treat our patients are completely unrecognisable. Some of the basics have stayed the same, but other things are completely unrecognisable. So we do need to update and change over time. We can't be seen to be standing still. As leaders, I think in order to continually deliver excellence in healthcare, we have to ensure that our staff remain competent with up-to-date knowledge within that evolving scope of practice. Apologies, I know we're just going slightly over time. I'm almost finished. We need to be aware as leaders that the people in our teams have different goals and they learn in different ways. So our team's education, the CPD, should be a varied mixture of learning activities relevant to their current and future practice. One person, for example, might want to discuss a case with others, whereas somebody else might just want half an hour to go and Google it, to write a one page of A4 of notes on that condition. I think therefore it goes without saying that a one-size-fits-all approach is unlikely to work when it comes to education of our staff, and that is acknowledged within this framework and with the title of this domain, which is diverse leadership, diverse and inclusive leadership. So I think what I'm trying to say is that simply putting on a few lunchtime CPD sessions is probably not going to be enough. I don't want us to offer training for the sake of training. Everyone has different goals and they all learn in different ways. One way to figure this out is to go directly to the individual, to the staff member, and find out what their learning needs are. Now, PDRs, appraisals and transitions to new roles and start of employment are obvious points in which we hold these discussions, but they can happen spontaneously too, and I think it's important to have open door policies and someone that staff know can go to be able to discuss a set of learning objectives and how they can meet those objectives moving forward. So going back to the MAST scenario, I think even though we all see the benefits and necessity of MAST training, none of us really like doing MAST training. I think that learning that's seen to be enforced from managers and leaders in their ivory towers as a box ticking exercise is likely to be dismissed and won't really be of any value. I think we need to have a democratic process of finding out our individual learners' needs as well as the team's needs as well. We should celebrate learning. Weekly gatherings, morning meetings can be used really effectively in this regard. You might want to have highlights of the week, for example, where colleagues share interesting or difficult cases or experiences. Other colleagues learn from that, and as a group discuss what went well, what went better, and as a group, the whole group's well-being and education will gradually move up. And then finally, how do we know that as leaders that we're successfully embedding learning? Now, I don't have the answers to this, it's an open-ended question, but for me, I guess that I know I'm doing a good job in helping the education of the team because I see improved image quality. So we've got X-ray quality. I can see that gradually over the past 8 years, image quality has anecdotally improved. Knowledge within the team, we don't get as many staff querying things as much as what we used to do. We've seen improved retention of staff, which is excellent. And again, we can't really put any figures on this, but some of that I would imagine is due to successfully embedding a learning environment, and improved quality as well within the imaging department. Apologies, we've gone slightly over there, but that's us done. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And you sound carried on perfectly, Rob. And it's great to hear those honest reflections coming through from all our speakers. So a huge thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences and your plans as well, because I think for many of our organisations, like you say, appraisal season is coming, and this is obviously now, as we can all see, going to be a really useful framework. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to come to Sarah and Fiona because I have seen some questions popping in to the chat. Also, if anybody wants to ask any questions, please pop your hand up and I will come to you if you've got a question that you want to ask one of our speakers. But while we're waiting for that, Fiona, I can see you on the screen. Do we have you got some questions?
There is one question that's come through, which is questioning if the e-learning can be downloaded to be included in your CPD file, or if there is a portfolio like in the support worker framework. So I think that's referring to the e-resource and whether that can be downloaded.
So Emily knows. I'm going to come to Emily because Emily is our out of all of us, you are most familiar with the e-resource. So Emily, I'll come to you for that one.
Thanks. So yeah, so the actual frame, the document itself, the e-learning itself can't be downloaded, but on each domain on the reflective page, it had that downloadable document. So that would be your downloadable resource. So all the questions that are on that reflective page are on the resource as well. So you can just download that, complete it. It comes as a Word document, and then you can just save it in your own files.
Brilliant. That's great.
There are no other questions at the moment, but if anyone does have any questions, if you pop them in.
I think there are
questions.
Yeah, there's some more. I can see them.
Yeah.
Sarah, can you?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So yeah, I guess clearly it's a bit of a reflection, but I think it's important. I think this webinar is really showing how important implementing the framework is. And just to think about, I guess the question being, how do we keep momentum and visualization of the framework so it becomes fully embedded? And actually, I've sort of said a similar question as Keely, so I think that's it. My question, so I'm going to put them together because I think they are the same thing. I wonder how people think we can embed this framework into practice in an easy and achievable way, because I think that's the key, isn't it? You know, when we're sort of thinking about what was talked about earlier is, you know, actually lots of us are doing it, we weren't necessarily aware of it, and we're getting that framework fatigue that we've just sort of heard about, which I agree with. So how do we do it in a way that we kind of make this our norm in a way that's easy? I can see Robert's got his hand up as well.
Rob, did you want to come in on that, or did you have a different question?
I was just going to give my view on how we might answer your question, Sarah, if you're happy with that.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, please do. We're all learning together on this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's key. I think what we do in our department, we try to create that culture where education is everyone's responsibility. So not just Andy's or mine, or I've got a small team of advanced practitioners, not just theirs. We have education in our job descriptions, but education's everyone's responsibility, whether that be Band 5s, Band 6, Band 7s, students. We can all learn from each other, and I think it's about those individuals knowing that they have a responsibility to educate others as well as learn from others. And there's no hierarchy with this. I've been fortunate enough to train a number of reporting radiographers over my career, and whilst I guess the majority of the training is from me to them, I frequently set them tasks to research areas of reporting and disease processes, and quite selfishly I use it in areas which I feel like I could gain some knowledge from. So it saves me a job of going and researching this disease or process. They research it as part of their education and their training, and then they can teach me. And we do the same with our undergraduates, our students, get them to go away rather than us just sitting in a classroom lecture style for 4 hours. Get them to have an hour with them, do an overview, and say, actually, I want you to have an hour in the library. I want you to research this process, you to research this, and then come back to us, and then present to us what they've learned. So I think that's key, that there's no hierarchy with this, and that everyone takes a role. And then just again try to change that culture over time, in that we're just doing it on a day-to-day basis. Just again, don't need to be formal lectures or anything like that, but just informal discussions, reflections on a weekly basis if at all possible. So that, because we are all learning as AHPs, I would argue that we all learn something new at least on a weekly basis, if not daily. But we don't often reflect on that. We don't often get to the end of the week and think, what have I done new? What have I learned? But if we did, then we would realise that we're probably already embedding this into daily practice. We just need to be a little bit more aware of it.
I think that's great. We've got Deborah, Ursula. I don't know if you're happy.
Yeah, come on in, Deborah.
Yeah, so following on from what Robert's just said there, absolutely great point about hierarchy. Today's been the epitome of there is no hierarchy, is there? Look at the speakers that we've had and everything else. There is no one group of staff over another group of staff. We've all learnt from everybody. And even if it's just down to something simple like presentation styles, because everybody's come on with slightly different presentation styles. Yeah, most of us have had a PowerPoint just to talk from, to give you some slides to look at and things. But, you know, some of the best was that beautiful conversation piece that we had, asking a question, answering the question, and what do you think? And it was a real conversational piece around this piece of work today. And you absolutely agree. Every day is a school day. And if somebody was to turn around to say that I know it all, and I've got to this point in my career, well, it's time to retire, because you don't know it all and you never will know it all. And we all need to learn from each other. So yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. really, really great, and great to have you here today. And really pleased that you're getting to see this happening across our region. So thank you, Deborah. Emily, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, it's on the same thought of the question of how we get this out and how we spread the word about this, and also, like I say, it's not a hierarchical thing. It can't always come down from, say, relying on practice educators, because as we know, we don't have that many practice educators to the amount of AHPs we have. So actually getting the word out from specific individual people, or again senior leaders. So I suppose it's maybe an ask to the group that's here today and everyone that's here, because hopefully we've got a wide range of people from all career stages, is sharing this with your colleagues. And whether it's you share the recording of today, or we do have some resources to give you at the end that you can share that or an easy how to find the resources, how to find the framework, and just encourage your colleagues to really utilise what's on offer for them. Because I think most people would probably say that's been involved in this webinar that just over the past couple of weeks, just by becoming aware of the framework, they've found use in it. So I suppose that's my ask, is that to keep it going is, can we all share with colleagues? I think that will get the word out quite quickly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. And Salima.
My question is coming from a support worker and
Oh, Salima, you're quite quiet for me. Is anybody else?
Yeah, sorry about that.
There we go.
Yeah, my question is going to be coming from the support worker angle, just to see how can we get the support workers to be more involved in this framework. Currently, I think they are actually seem to be more of the receivers than having to give out from what they have. And how can we get them to be more involved in the case of having to be in supervision roles, positions to educate others and things like that, not just being the receivers or going for CPDs and all of that?
I'm happy to come in on this one, because within South Yorkshire, we've done quite a lot of work on really promoting the role of the support workforce with our learners, whether that be students coming at an undergraduate level or apprentices, of which we have many at different levels within our teams. But I think, we know that our support workers already do this, but actually sometimes it's about their confidence. So we're really asking our support workers to really take a proactive role in their involvement with learners who join their teams, and with the educators who are responsible as the registered AHP with our learners. And I think that is something that is in the AHP support worker career framework, as well as part of your role as support workers. So I think, again, it's really aligning these two frameworks and thinking about giving our support workers the opportunities to do that, because what our students and learners tell us is actually they are often much more comfortable with our support workforce than they are with our registered AHP colleagues, and that there's so much that our support workers have to offer. So I think, like Emily said, I think we need to be talking about this within our teams, and hopefully you'll be able to signpost people to the resources that we send out and this recording. If you've got people in your teams who want to catch up on it, then absolutely we need our support workers involved in this, for it to really play out in the way that we want it to. So great question, and thank you. And I'll come to Sarah.
Yeah, I'm just keeping an eye on the Q&As here, Ursula, so that I was just going to kind of shout out some of those as well.
Right.
We've also got a question and then some thoughts, some reflections about that, but what would be the best way of raising the profile in clinical settings? Someone else has written about making it part of the PDR, PADR, so making it part of that extra, making it part of that renewal process, or that yearly process, as that. I also just this personally was just thinking about how it could be embedded into preceptorship as something that we talk about, because if we think about our early, if it starts at the start of our career, or even our students and step to work year 3 university students, if we even go back, but actually if it becomes the norm that this is just everyday practice, then that becomes our everyday practice. So I think we could really think about it could be easily embedded into preceptorship programs, into the PDR, whatever sort of fits as a way. And someone else just put a question. So Stephanie, is the aim for all AHPs at all levels to use the framework individually to analyse / evaluate their own level and then use it to develop aims and goals in their own / others' development?
And I would say yes, that
Absolutely,
is.
yes.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Hopefully this has given you a real flavour, and we have covered a lot of information, so we are going to give you those resources for you to look back on, and the e-resource is brilliant, but I will bring our expert Deborah in on that.
So yeah, I absolutely agree. You're right. Yes, it is, but it's also about the employers using this framework as well to make sure that its full workforce are getting involved. The one thing that I didn't say, after the domains in the document, there's also an element of accreditation, which what we've done with the document is we've aligned it to advanced HEs domains. So any of you that are doing any level of education out in clinical practice can actually apply for the Associate Educator Award. And it goes up in different, so you get fellow, senior fellow and principal fellow, but you can be an associate fellow of advanced HE as well. So it's a badge that you can put against your name. By using this framework, you'll be able to use it to sort your accreditation out if you wanted to, but nobody's saying you've got to have accreditation, in the same way that we don't say that you've got to have a supervisor or a mentor award, etc. But it is something there that you could use for your own CPD if you wanted to going forwards, and that's anybody on this call. So yeah, it is possible.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So I am aware of the time, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a summary, and then we will go to final poll. So if you can just bear with me, I will just share the slides again and bring us to the final slides. And then everybody is probably ready to move. Apologies, it is a huge slide deck. We're almost there. Okay, so I think we've covered actually quite a lot of this in the discussion that we've just had. So this is just a summary of what you can do next, and hopefully we have met some of those learning outcomes that we set out. So hopefully using the framework, you can clearly identify which career stage you are at, and then you can visit the resources that Emily took us through, and you will be able to use, you know, if you go onto the resource and you're thinking, actually, what do I do? What do I press? You'll be able to use the slide deck that we send you as a little bit of a how-to guide, because Emily's slides walk you through the navigation of the e-resource. Then once you've identified your career stage, you'll be able to identify your educational capabilities for your current career stage for each of the 6 domains that we've talked about during this afternoon's webinar. And like we've seen on some of the reflections from our speakers and the case study that Emily presented, you'll be able to identify any gaps and areas for development that you might want that might align with how you want your career to go. And it is there as well, because you never know when HCPC may come knocking on your door, and this is then going to be real great evidence that you can then submit to the HCPC for any such audit. So we have really tried to think about how we make this framework easy and useful for you within your busy clinical operational services. So we really do hope it has been useful. The resources will be on the slides. So we've got the links to the framework itself, the link to the e-resources that Emily took us through, and Emily Rawcliffe from Humber and North Yorkshire has she's made this infographic which is really, really great and really simply talks you through how to use it and how and help your colleagues understand the framework. So Emily has very kindly offered to share that, so we will send that out with slides. If you did, she has also made the offer that people can rebrand it if they need to for their organisation. If you do want to do that, just contact Emily and she's happy to share the Canva template for you to do that, because I think we do need to change that culture, and it will happen gradually as we see our students and support workers moving through their careers and it moving up through our different career stages over the coming years. So huge thanks to Emily. It's a really, really great poster. So we are almost there. So we would really love you if you wouldn't mind to engage in our final poll. So quite simply, do you feel after this webinar that you are confident to start using the AHP Educator framework to evidence your education pillar of practice? I'm filling this in as well because like we've said all along, I've learnt loads from this afternoon. And we're seeing the results there. We've only got 51 responses out of the 84 people. So if we could get a few more responses, that would be great. 77%, but 23 maybe. And I guess for those people who have clicked maybe, have a look at that e-resource, because I think once you maybe look at that and have a play with it, hopefully that will really help increase your confidence, because it is great and it really brings that framework to life in terms of actually, like Emily said, being able to complete and download those reflective pieces for each domain of your career stage that you can then put with wherever you store your CPD, whether you do that just on a Word document and on your laptop, but there are online, I know some professional bodies, Royal College of OT have got a CPD part to their website that we can access as members. So we are at time. Hopefully I've remembered everything. A huge thank you to our speakers. Particular thanks, I think, to our students who are on their placement. I think you'll be hopefully getting great feedback. I can see Sarah clapping. Yeah, you've done really well, and hopefully it has been a great opportunity for you and something that helps you think about the framework in your careers. Go back and tell your cohort when you go back to Bradford University. But a huge thank you to all of our speakers. I know giving up your time to think about preparing for these webinars is a huge ask in itself. And enjoy the rest of your weeks. I'll get Emily, was it you who recorded, to stop the recording? And we will be sharing the resources, the slide deck and the recording and where to find that in the next few days. So